One man is being victimized by our own government. One man whom they fear, yet who millions love. One man who is willing to take the poison arrows of lawfare. One man whose voice has been taken away by a corrupt judge operating in a corrupt system. One man who has been ridiculed and insulted. One man who refused to back down. One man who refused to back down. One man who refused to back down. One man who stands between us and them. One man that wants to see America protected again. One man who wants to see America prosper again. One man who understands that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. One man who understands and protects the blessing of life. One man who wants to restore American exceptionalism. One man who once again wants to make America that shining city on a hill for all to see. A place where all the people of the world glowingly set their eyes upon. America. One man who unashamedly wants to make America great again. That one man is Donald Trump.
This is Fanfare with Barry Cunningham.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Before we get to some somber news, I just wanted to make sure I immediately welcomed everybody and said, Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you are with family. Hope you're with loved ones. And if you're not with loved ones where you are with loved ones here. Just so you know that if you're feeling lonely, if you need people to talk to, you got a group of people here who are more than willing to hang out with you. So we're going to do this show today. We're going to see a press conference with Kash Patel, a whole bunch of people. Kash Patel, Judge Janine, and more will be on the podium here talking about what happened yesterday with the shooting of the National Guardsman. And it's just really interesting to me as I'm turning on television, the contrast that we're seeing right now with, the Macy's Day Parade and people having fun. And the word that comes to mind is resilience. Americans are resilient. Americans know they have to keep coming back. You get knocked down, you get right back up. You got to get back in the game. Doesn't mean we forget. Doesn't mean that we're not going to be prepared. Doesn't mean that we're not going to grieve about what's happened and possibly mourn if these two people end up not making it. But at the same time, it sounds so much like a cliche, life goes on. But the problem is, too many people want life to go on without knowing you have to change. Whether you're overweight and you have to go on diets, whether you're trying to stop smoking, whether you're trying to mend a relationship, or whether you're trying to fix a country. Life goes on, but the way life goes on does not have to stay the same. And in this instance, it can't stay the same. It has to change. The life of Americans can go on and be prosperous and safe, but something has to change, and it has to change very, very quickly. The Democrats are out in full force. They're going to object to, as I mentioned last night. By the way, if you haven't seen what President Trump said last night, because it was on a moment's notice, Let me go ahead and play that before they come on. Hopefully I can get through it.
My great fellow Americans, earlier today, on the eve of the Thanksgiving holiday, 2 members of the National Guard serving in Washington, D.C., were shot at point-blank range in a monstrous ambush-style attack just steps away from the White House. They had been deputized as part of the most successful public safety and national security mission in the history of our nation's capital, the D.C. Safe and Beautiful Task Force, which has achieved an unprecedented reduction in violent crime and crimes of all type. This heinous assault was an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror. It was a crime against our entire nation. It was a crime against humanity. The hearts of all Americans tonight are with those 2 members of the West Virginia National Guard and their families. The love of our entire country is pouring out for them, and we are lifting them up in our prayers. As we are filled with anguish and grief for those who were shot, we're also filled with righteous anger and ferocious resolve. As President of the United States, I am determined to ensure that the animal who perpetrated this atrocity pays the steepest possible price. I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth. He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about. Nobody knew who was coming in. Nobody knew anything about it. His status was extended under legislation signed by President Biden, a disastrous president, the worst in the history of our country. This attack underscores the single greatest national security threat facing our nation. The last administration let in 20 million unknown and unvetted foreigners from all over the world, from places that you don't want to even know about. No country can tolerate such a risk to our very survival. An example is Minnesota, where hundreds of thousands of Somalians are ripping off our country and ripping apart that once great state. Billions of dollars are lost, and gangs of Somalians come from a country that doesn't even have a government, no laws, no water, no military, no nothing. As their representatives in our country preach to us about our Constitution and how our country is no good. We're not going to put up with these kind of assaults on law and order by people who shouldn't even be in our country. We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden, and we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here or add benefit to our country. If they can't love our country, we don't want them. America will never bend and never yield in the face of terror. And at the same time, we will not be deterred from the mission these service members were so nobly fulfilling. That is why tonight I can announce that I have directed the Department of War to mobilize an additional 500 troops to help protect our capital city. We will make America totally safe again, and we will bring the perpetrator of this barbaric attack to swift and certain justice if the bullets going in the opposite direction haven't already done that. During this time of the year, when we gather at home with loved ones, these 2 patriots were wearing the uniform of our country, patrolling the streets of our capital. They had taken a selfless oath to defend our nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that is exactly what they were doing when they were gunned down in a savage attack. I want to express my extraordinary gratitude to every member of the United States military who is deployed tonight, at home and abroad. I also want to thank the Secret Service and the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department for their work today. This Thanksgiving, I ask every family to say a prayer for the 2 great heroes who were so horribly shot, and for their loved ones. Please say a prayer. May God bless them and comfort them, and may God bless and protect the United States of America. Thank you and good night.
So that was President Trump late last night, about 9:15 or 9:20, had very little notice and said he was going on, making a statement. That was a statement he made. The Democrats are already looking to sue. I guess if there's a court open someplace, they would have already filed. They are going to fight this tooth and nail. I said this last night after hearing President Trump speak. After hearing him speak last night, every single one of us who are watching understand that's exactly what we need to do and much more. The problem is he's going to get fought by the Democrats, the media, and probably even some people on the Republican side. There is no way, and I want you to really grasp this, there is absolutely no way he is going to be able to do what needs to be done the conventional way, the conventional process. You're not going to pass a law. There's no way that they're going to pass a law, get 60 votes. They probably won't even get 51 votes to do what needs to be done. It's not going to happen. The only way this is going to work, the only way he's going to be able to get mass deportations and get these people out of our country, there's only one way, and he's going to have to declare the Insurrection Act. He's going to have to declare some sort of martial law. That's it. Absent that happening, I personally feel we're done. Who knows how many tens of millions of people are in here, and we're not going to be able to get a handle on it by using legislation. It's not going to happen. I think you have to steal your gird at this point and realize we are in a bad, bad way. We are fighting a war from within. These people are not going to give an inch. In fact, they're going to want more. They're going to want even more people to come in. And if Kamala had won, this wouldn't even be America anymore. They are going to do everything in their power to destroy this country. It is now obvious. And if it's obvious to me and it's obvious to you, it's obvious to President Trump as well. There can be no denying that the intent of the Democrats and the liberals is to bring America to its knees. Now, if you know that, and I know that, and he knows that, then you have to understand legislation cannot make this work. There will be too much opposition, and on top of the opposition, it will take way too long. So I would expect, while he's down here in Palm Beach and Mar-a-Lago, he's talking to people, he's getting the legal team together, and I would expect something very soon, probably right after Christmas, if he waits that long. And so you, as I said last night, you got to get ready. Because mentally, this is going to be a fight of all fights. And it's worth this. It's worth the fight. It's worth it because of people like the two guards people who got shot yesterday. By the way, SB sent me something. I can't show the video, but I can show the tweet. Pam Bondi was on Fox this morning. She says the two National Guardsmen made it through surgery. Amazingly, they're still alive and are with families in the hospital. She said they came through surgery. I'm not going to talk about their conditions right now. I know their families are with them. I can't show that video of her talking because certain people won't like it. They're doing, this is the CPR video you've probably seen going on. They're playing that on a loop on Fox right now. So it is now 9:12. They have not walked out as of yet. As you can see, they've got the stage all set up, ready for Judge Janine, Kash Patel, and a whole host of characters. We're just going to wait for that to come on, and then we can we'll take that. So tough day, especially tough for these people and their families. I can't even imagine what they're going through on their Thanksgiving. And literally, people are sitting down, getting ready. People are cooking, getting ready to have a great time for Thanksgiving. And we got to deal with this crap. So be resilient. Enjoy the time with your family. I'm not telling, and I would never advocate people to be upset to the point where you can't enjoy your holiday. Eat your food, watch your football, pray. Do those things, maybe pray first, then eat your food and watch some football and enjoy your family. Right now, that's all we can do. There's going to be very little news other than this. President Trump, unless he comes out later and hits the microphone again, I don't know what, I looked to see what the schedule is. Nothing's posted as of yet, so we shall see. Let's see what else. SV sent me anything else here. Let's see here. That's about it. There's a whole lot of stuff out there that's, possibly true, not true, conjecture. Be careful with the disinformation. They're giving an update right now. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull this update so you guys can see this.
An Afghan national led into the country under the Biden administration in 2021. President Trump says lax migration policies are, quote, the single greatest national security threat facing our nation. The administration now suspending some immigration applications. Dana Marie McNichol is in West Palm Beach, Florida, traveling with the president this Thanksgiving. Hello, Dana Marie.
Hi, Mike. Good morning. The president has been receiving updates of the shooting while spending his Thanksgiving here in Palm Beach. As you mentioned last night, the White House posted a video message where the president called this act of violence an act of terror.
Two members of the...
Well, you just saw that. So I want to bring something to you while we're waiting, and I hope this won't get me in trouble. It's a very good... Here's how I would say, a very good synopsis of where we are right now. This is from a woman called Amy Meck. Amy Meck is from the organization is called the Rise, Align, Ignite, and Reclaim organization. Not really sure what they're all about, but she gives a very good accounting of what happened. As I'm looking, they're getting the stage set up. If I have time to get into this, you can see what's going on right there. So they're going to talk about this guy, which is what I want to get into. I don't know if you guys have done much information as to what exactly this dude is all about, but let me jump into this while we're waiting for everything to get set up. This is hard, because then you realize as you read this what may be happening. I have to be very careful. I have to say may be happening because I believe it is indeed happening. The DC attack is even more explosive than first reported. Americans were initially told the shooter near the White House was just an Afghan national, but new reporting paints a far more alarming picture. The suspect, I'm not going to dignify giving his name. Oh, she's on stage. We're going to come back to it. I'm sure they're going to touch into it as well. They're on stage.
All right, Alicia, you know where to go. Where's Blanchard? There he is. Okay, good. It seems like we've been here before. Is this working? Is this on? Where's... It's working? All right. Thank you all for being here on this difficult day. As you know, my name is Janine Pirro. I am the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, and I am joined here by several individuals who represent agencies who have been working around the clock since this horrific event happened. To my left, we have the director of the FBI. We have General Leland Blanchard of the National Guard. Mayor Bowser is here as well. We have Frank Saldana of the DEA, Chris Hecht of DHS, Executive Assistant Chief Jeffrey Carroll of the MPD, Darren Cox of the Washington FBI Field Office, and a Special Agent in Charge, Samuel Ward of the ATF in Washington. Now, I want to provide you with an update on the tragic shooting that occurred on two brave members of the West Virginia National Guard as they served in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, today, as most families join together to give thanks for the blessings that have been bestowed upon them, two families are shattered and destroyed and torn apart as a result of the actions of one man. First and foremost, our hearts go out to the victims and their families. These are dedicated service members who were performing their duties in service to our nation, and they are currently in critical condition. They have undergone surgery. We pray for their well-being as they continue to be cared for in the best possible way. We have been in constant contact with their families and have provided them with every resource needed during this difficult time. The two National Guards men that we're talking about are Sarah Beckstrom, who's 20 years old, and Andrew Wolf, who is 24 years old. They were uniformed members of the West Virginia National Guard, and they were in D.C. to keep D.C. safe, pursuant to President Trump's executive order to make D.C. safe and beautiful. They answered the call, they took the charge, they volunteered, they put their lives on the line for people they don't even know. And that, unfortunately, is becoming a reality more and more for the members of law enforcement. Yesterday on Thanksgiving Eve at approximately 2:15, near 17th and I Streets in the northwest section of the district, near the Farragut West Metro Station, two uniformed guardsmen were ambushed in a brazen and targeted attack. A lone gunman opened fire without provocation, ambush style, armed with a .357 Smith & Wesson revolver. One guardsman is struck, goes down, and then the shooter leans over and strikes the guardsman again. Another guardsman is struck several times. Fellow guardsmen who were there responded immediately, engaging the suspect, neutralizing the threat, and subduing him at the scene. He was transported to a local hospital where he remains, as we speak, under heavy guard. Thanks to the swift and coordinated response of the National Guard and the Metropolitan Police Department, no additional victims were harmed, and the scene was secured within minutes. The suspect, he has been identified as Ramanullah Lakanwal, a 29-year-old Afghan who entered the United States under Biden's Operation Allies Welcome, a program following the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. He resided in Bellingham, Washington, with his wife and, we believe, 5 children. And we're working very closely with our federal partners, especially DHS and the FBI, to review his immigration history and the vetting process itself. What we know about him is that he drove his vehicle across country from the state of Washington with the intended target of coming to our nation's capital. As we stand here today, the charges that are appropriate right now are 3 counts of assault with intent to kill while armed, a violation of D.C. Code 22-401 and D.C. Code 22-4502. He will also be charged with possession of a firearm during a crime of violence. He faces 15 years under the assault with the intent to kill. We intend to continue monitoring what the charges will be, depending upon the well-being of the guardsmen. We are praying that they survive and that the highest charge will not have to be murder in the first degree. But make no mistake, if they do not, that will certainly be the charge, murder in the first degree. The Department of Justice, under Attorney General Pam Bondi, is committed to a thorough and an impartial investigation where we will hold this perpetrator accountable under the full weight of the law. Now, Sarah and Andrew volunteered. They came here to protect the people of the district, pursuant to a crime emergency that President Trump rightly declared in this city and in other cities across the country. Our nation's capital should not and must not be a place where evil comes to commit violence, whatever their cause or motive may be. We should not have to live in fear in the nation's capital, especially by one who came here from a foreign country. Through a process that was so absurd that he came through and released into this country, as many were, knowing virtually nothing about his vetting. This is what happens in this country when people are allowed in who are not properly vetted. These guardsmen and all who are here to protect the district are the line that separates a civilized society from a barbaric one. They are the ones who stand for law and order. This was not just an attack. It was a direct challenge to law and order in our nation's capital. And the individual will be made fully accountable. And though it seems that we have been here before under President Trump, make no mistake, and the Attorney General, we will not allow this to be normalized. It will be confronted, condemned, and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Now, my message to the individual who committed these acts is you picked the wrong target, the wrong city, and the wrong country, and you will be sorry for the violence and the evil that you perpetrated in our nation's capital. And now I call upon the Director of the FBI, Kash Patel.
Thanks, Judge. I'll begin my remarks and my remarks the same way, with prayer for our fallen soldiers, prayer for our law enforcement community, prayer for our National Guardsmen and women, prayer for our brave prosecutors at the Department of Justice and the offices of the D.C. United States Attorney. We must come together as a nation, especially on this Thanksgiving Day, and remember the sacrifices that so many are making around the world and around this country to secure our freedoms under President Trump's brilliant leadership and administration. I'll provide an update on the case as follows. It is an ongoing investigation of terrorism. Make no mistake about it. The FBI is leading out on this federal assault on a federal law enforcement officer investigation on many fronts. We immediately, with our law enforcement partners in the Metropolitan Police Department and the interagency, secured the scene, seized the weapon, sent in our evidence response team immediately to collect evidence, and started doing block-by-block canvasses. We are looking for and interviewing witnesses. The firearm and other materials have been sent to our Quantico laboratory already yesterday for immediate analysis. That work is ongoing. Partnering with the D.C. United States Attorney's Office, we have also executed multiple search warrants around the country to include the subject's last known residence, which is in the state of Washington. The search warrant was executed on that house last night or early this morning, and it is an ongoing process. All the individuals found in the house have been interviewed, and some interviews remain ongoing. We will not stop until we interview anyone and everyone associated with the subject, the house, and every piece of his life. There's also subject interviews, relations conducted in San Diego, pursuant to our ongoing investigation. So, as the judge noted, this is a coast-to-coast investigation being led right here in Washington, D.C., and this subject definitely did pick the wrong country. And we will rise together as a nation to show the world what we do here. And we are thankful that we have the Attorney General's brave leadership and President Trump's brave leadership and priorities to safeguard our communities. I also spoke to Director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, last night, and Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. There is confirmation now that the subject had a relationship in Afghanistan with partner forces. We are fully investigating that aspect of his background as well, to include any known associates that are either overseas or here in the United States of America. That is what a broad-based international terrorism investigation looks like. We will provide continuous details to the American public while at the same time not jeopardizing the ongoing prosecution to ultimately hold this perpetrator accountable in our courts of law. We will provide as much transparency as possible, but as you can see, the breadth and scope of this investigation will continue. We will continue to hit the streets and hit every town and every house and talk to every witness. The men and women of the FBI and the Metropolitan Police Department and the interagency, to include the Department of Homeland Security, DEA, and ATF, are working tirelessly on this Thanksgiving Day. And I know just by talking to the leaders behind me that instead of going on and being with their families, everyone rogered up and showed up to work today. And none of them want to go home. That's the resolve that we have together as a team to bring to you justice for this heinous act of terrorism here in our nation's capital. And as the judge said, we will ensure that our law enforcement partners are out there in full force to make sure the world can enjoy our nation's capital. We will not let this heinous act of violence prevent people from visiting our beautiful nation's capital. And we will also continue to highlight any evidence that we can publicly. And as the judge said, this individual is in this country for one reason and one reason alone: because of the disastrous withdrawal from the Biden administration and the failure to vet anyway, in any way, shape, or form, this individual and countless others. And this administration has taken the rightful step to stop any.
They'll watch parades, football games. They'll pray together. They'll talk about what they're grateful for. This morning, there are two families that will not have that opportunity. Andy and Sarah's families, they're spending the day reflecting on the past, and in the days coming, they'll reflect on and think about what could have been, what might be. Because regardless of the outcome, we know that their lives, their families' lives are all changed forever. Because one person decided to do this horrific and evil thing. And all across America, we are also reminded that there are many law enforcement agents, first responders, soldiers, service members all around the world who at best will come home, eat some cold turkey, open up Tupperware, eat what's left over, because they spent the day defending the American ideals, getting out there and getting after it on every American citizen's behalf. I will say that the District of Columbia National Guard, this task force, is more committed this morning to the President's directive to make D.C. safe and beautiful. Our resolve will be tested. It is being tested, but make no mistake, each and every one of these soldiers and airmen will meet and exceed the expectation that we have for them. They are, in fact, America's best. I'm proud of each and every one of them. I pray for each and every one of them today, and in particular for these two young service members who are willing to go above and beyond and pay whatever price our nation asks of them. I ask every American today to keep them in their thoughts and prayers as you go about your day. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Mayor, where's Mayor Bowser?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judge. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C., and I want to associate myself with the remarks of our Adjutant General from the D.C. National Guard. I want to be very clear what the judge and everyone has reported here. Somebody drove across the country, came to Washington, D.C. to attack America. And that person will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. These young people should be at home in West Virginia with their families.
ATF, anybody? DHS? Anyone? Okay. I also want to say that both Sarah and Andrew, I believe, were sworn in less than 24 hours before they were shot on the street in Washington. Any questions?
Could you drill down on a possible motive? Have you got any information and intelligence on a possible motive for the shooting?
You know, as the directors indicated, this is a fluid investigation. People are working around the clock. It's too soon to say what the motive is, but there are definitely areas that we're looking into, but not ready to say.
Can you characterize a little bit about how the assailant was taken down after he opened fire?
Yeah, he got shot
But by another guard?
by another guardsman, yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that he had the shooter had initially shot one of the guardsmen then leaned over as they were
Shot him again. Yep.
How many shots are we?
Well, the specific number. Look, he had a .357 Smith & Wesson revolver. Okay, so I believe that's a six-shooter. Yeah. So, that kind of tells us how many shots he had. Yes.
Judge, you had mentioned we've been here before because we have. It was May when we were last
Yeah.
here. I want to ask if you could please comment to, obviously, we understand that you're saying this is under the Biden administration, and the words are that it was a failed withdrawal, and what happened there. There are people who are also upset with the president believing that the National Guard members should not even have been there if it were not for the executive order.
I don't even want to talk about whether they should have been there. We ought to kiss the ground and thank God that the president said it's time to bring in more law enforcement to make sure that a city that had the fourth highest homicide rate in the country was that violence was quelled. I'm not even going to go there.
A question for Director Patel. Was the suspect granted asylum, and if so, when did that happen, under which administration, and did authorities miss any signs, either in the asylum process or even back when he reportedly worked for the CIA? If you could talk about that.
Well, you miss all the signs when you do absolutely zero vetting. And that's exactly what happened in this case. When you, in the prior administration, made the decision to allow thousands of people into this country without doing a single piece of background checking or vetting, that's how you miss every single sign. And Secretary Kristi Noem has put out details specifically related to your other questions, so I'll let that speak for themselves.
Specificity of when he was granted, if or when he was granted asylum, if you could just clarify that timeline and...
Yes, I believe Kristi Noem put that out, and that's a DHS matter, and I'll refer it to them.
Could you elaborate on the investigative steps that were taken
Sure.
in San Diego? You mentioned Bellingham, Washington.
Sure.
But could you explain the San Diego connection?
So what happened was, thanks to the quick investigation by the interagency and the FBI, we were able to track down his last known residence, working with the United States Attorney's offices here and at the Department of Justice and prosecutors across the country. We were able to serve search warrants literally overnight and through the night.
All night.
And we were able to hit the house in Washington State. During that process, we seized numerous electronic devices to include cell phones, laptops, iPads, and other material that is being analyzed as we speak. Pursuant to that investigation and any known associates of the subject and of that house is how we ended up in San Diego, where interviews were conducted and are going to be continued to be conducted. And we will go anywhere in the country or the world where the evidence leads us.
Are there accomplices, relationships in San Diego you can talk about?
All of that is an ongoing investigation.
Can anyone give an update as far as Sarah and Andrew who were injured? You say critical condition. Can you give anything beyond that? Are they expected to make it? Is it touch and go? Can you tell us a little more about how they're doing?
And the full spelling of their names, please.
It is Sarah Beckstrom, Beckstrom, and Andrew Wolfe with an E, Wolfe. Okay, and Sarah Beckstrom.
How do you spell Sarah?
Oh, S with an H. Okay. Now, with respect to their medical condition, as I said, they are receiving the finest medical care. Their families are with them now. They are critical. I think you understand the meaning of that. It's not clear, how this is going to end up. But let me be perfectly clear about how it will end up in this office. If one of them is to pass, and God forbid that happens, this is a murder one. Period. End of the story. We are praying on a day like today when families come together in America and they hold hands around the Thanksgiving table. I beg you, I beseech you to pray for these two young people that they survive. Okay. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Happy.
Yeah, we're not going there. We're not going there. No. Thank you.
Decision not to charge him as a terrorist?
What about the asylum process that led him to get asylum under this administration?
Wow. Muriel Bowser, I don't know what she was thinking. I guess she just wants to get out of Dodge. And these reporters, I don't know what goes through the mind of these idiots and how you asked her if they weren't in Washington, then this wouldn't have happened. I mean, didn't we go through this a long time ago through the Me Too movement that the woman wearing the short skirt and the tight blouse She doesn't deserve any man to do something to her. She should, people used to say she knew what would happen if you wore that kind of an outfit. It's insane. It has nothing to do with this guy traveling across the country with a weapon, probably paid for by us, if you know what I mean. I'm going to show you. And the reporters and people online are saying, well, if the soldiers weren't there, then he wouldn't get shot. I don't even know what kind of level of insanity you have to say to make that kind of argument. If they weren't there, then they wouldn't have got shot. So it's your fault for putting them in harm's way. So this guy who was 3,000 miles away decides he's going to come across the country by car or truck, maybe by truck, with a .357 Magnum. How many different laws has he broken along the way? Crossing state lines with a weapon, and you're not even supposed to be in the country. So you're probably not a licensed firearm owner. You probably don't have a right to that weapon. And you're going from state to state to state to state, coming across the country with the sole intention. You weren't there to go see the Washington Monument. You weren't there to go see the Lincoln Memorial. You were there to go wreak havoc. And you're telling me you're wondering, oh my gosh, if they hadn't been there when he drove 3,000 miles across the country, then they wouldn't have been in danger. Let me just tell you something, Mr. and Mrs. Press. Every single person this man encountered from Washington all the way across the country was in danger. At any point, he could have just gone off wherever he stopped for gas, whatever he stopped to eat. All those people were in danger. He just happened to have a mission. See, that's where the difference is. This isn't some homicidal maniac. See, a homicidal maniac at any point along his journey could have just begun taking people out like a serial killer. That's not what he was. That's not what he did. He didn't stop at a gas station or a grocery store or a restaurant or even a hotel along the way, not that we know of, and take anybody out. Now, this guy had a focused mission, well intended. He decided he was going to come across the country and take out a National Guards person. So your rationale is if they weren't there, it wouldn't have happened. Well, what if his mission was to go and take out a cop? What if he's like, I'm going to go to an armory? I'll go looking for somebody. He just happened to stop in Washington, D.C. because he knew they were there. But his mindset was, I'm going to go take these people out. And yet you're saying the most stupid of things. Now let me throw another wrinkle into the mix here. I started covering it beforehand. I want to show you before we go. I'm not going to keep you too long because it's Thanksgiving after all. But I want this is so important. I started showing it to you. I'm going to restart it so you guys can follow and begin doing your own research as some of you would be doing today, because I know some of you are digging in. All right, so I want you to look at this. The D.C. attack is even more explosive than first reported. All right? Americans were initially told the shooter near the White House was just an Afghan nationalist, but it's a far more alarming picture, and indeed it is. There's a guy's name, which I won't say. He just wasn't any newcomer. According to multiple outlets, he was a highly trained veteran of Afghanistan's elite commando corps, fighting alongside U.S. Special Forces in Kandahar for over a decade. That means he was a trained operative. That means this guy was a trained killer. I'm not going to go into the whole MK Ultra, or was it just specifically from the culture he's from, but in any event, this wasn't just some wacko on the street. This guy came from training. Several reports, and as I said, and that training goes to that agency. Really? Huh. There's a story going around that I could not verify, but it's public knowledge. If you put his name into Google Trends, you will see an uptick in the search for his name prior to what happened. Now, we're not talking John Smith. We're not talking Sheila Williams. We're talking that name, this name. We're talking that name. So it's not an easy thing that somebody might mistype or happen to be saying John Smith. Some people, because it was an uptick. So one person searching wouldn't have caused an uptick. And the uptick in Google Trends was prior to the incident. That's important when you hear the rest of this. All right, so here we go. He was involved in some way with that three-letter agency. Several reports now claim that he was part of a CIA-backed Kandahar strike force, a covert paramilitary unit described as one of the most lethal and secretive forces of the Afghan war. Seriously? This guy was wandering around our country, and he was a member of basically a special forces unit? Public reporting says this unit carried out night raids, terror missions, targeted operations of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, intelligence-driven strikes outside the Afghan chain of command. Confirmed U.S. government ties. Fox News and other outlets report he was working with multiple U.S. agencies during the war. Former CIA Director John Ratcliffe confirmed publicly. Wait a minute. Wait. What do you mean? Isn't John Ratcliffe the current CIA Director? Let me check that. What do you mean former? I'm pretty sure he is. Who is the CIA Director right now? CIA Director. Let me just check that. If Ratcliffe wasn't, who is? Yeah, it's Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe is currently the CIA Director. Not sure why she says former. Interesting. All right, so let's continue. All right, so yeah, she says former. So he's actually CIA Director now. He worked with U.S. government, including the CIA. Why is it that so many high-profile incidents, keeping things clean here, why do so many of these high-profile incidents have some relation or attachment to that three-letter agency, all the way back to Kennedy? Why is it that they're just not randos? Why is it that it's just always somebody who was aligned with a three-letter agency like that? Why is that? Very interesting, don't you say? Okay, he should never have been brought into the United States. How he entered the United States. According to NBC News and other sources, he was granted a special immigrant visa in 2021 during a chaotic withdrawal. He later received asylum. He had been living in Washington State. He has a wife and 5 sons. His relatives had not heard from him in months. A former operative special forces guy aligned with the CIA, has a wife and 5 kids, and somehow just goes poof. And that was never reported. Are you telling me there are former, guys like this that are just wandering around ticking time bombs that nobody's watching, keeping tabs on? Yeah, it gets weird. So then the actual thing happened at 2:15. He ambushed 2 unarmed West Virginia National Guardsmen, and then he made the perfect mantra cry as he was doing it. You know the words. A concerning new data point. Public trends, oh, here it is right here, visible to anyone, shows a spike in searches for his name hours before the incident. This does not prove foreknowledge, but it raises serious questions and deserves investigations. Congress should subpoena the hype. No. I'm done with Congress. You know, as soon as a reporter starts talking about Congress should subpoena this and subpoena, no. We don't have time for that. It's all well intended, and we're trying to follow the process here. But at this point, we got to rip the Band-Aid off. The process doesn't work. The process takes too long. The process is poison and toxic because of the people and the hands involved. Too many people have too many agendas. We can't go by the normal process. The question everyone is asking, if the suspect was trained by U.S. forces, tied to a covert three-letter agency linked strike force, admitted through a SIV pipeline known to intelligence services, how did he end up shooting American soldiers outside the White House? And why was someone with this background not being monitored? You know, sometimes over the next couple days, you're full on turkey and you have a little bit of a tryptophan effect going on, and you're tired of watching the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. Turn on the Bourne Identity. Just watch the Bourne Identity and say to yourself, is that really happening? Could they really do that? Or maybe Telethon, way back in the day of Charles Bronson. Does that really happen? How many times have you heard people say, I don't know what happened? They don't even know. This guy knows. What are the real QSF and KSF members who entered the U.S. under the same pipeline? Where are they? Who approved them? Who vetted them? Who's tracking them now? These individuals were not ordinary refugees. They were part of an intelligence-linked force. Public commentators are calling for full oversight. Too late for oversight. We can't do that process. Nope. This is no longer a simple story of just some guy who just went on an attack. No, it's not. Based on what is emerging, the case now involves alleged three-letter agency-linked units, special forces training, U.S.-issued visa protections, a rushed post-withdrawal intake system, unusual online activity, and now these two are fighting for their lives. And here's the guy's ID. It says Kandahar Strike Force QSF, and there he is. I don't know that military designation of E5 and all that stuff. I'm not in there, but that is the beginning of the story. It's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of it. And we need to know the answers. But we're not going to get the answers. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, we need the answers. But just trust you're not going to get any. We didn't get anything on Crooks. We didn't get anything on Ryan Huth, however you say his name, the guy who was crawling around in the bushes. We're not getting anything on Charlie Kirk. We're not going to get anything here. Everything is... But in any event, you now know some things, and you now know why the only way this is going to get fixed, and I hope you agree that is what has to happen. President Trump has to know at this point it's far beyond control. It's far beyond Congress. It's far beyond any legislation. This country is gone if we don't rein this in and rein it in quickly by any means necessary. If it's going to be painful, if it's going to fracture the interior of the country, if it's going to cause so much internal strife because some people are liberal crazies, so be it. So be it. If we have to go through a period of time, 3 or 4 months of just complete seeming anarchy, it's better than 3 or 4 months of what they may have planned, as far as I'm concerned. So, gird your loins. Vicky says, time to drop the hammer. Exactly. president must make a move right now. I completely agree. Don't be black pilled, Barry. Do I have my pills here? I didn't take. Did I take my pill this morning? Oh yeah. No. That's me. There we go. Red all the way, baby. Red all the way. You guys should know that. People speak up. Yeah, get ready. Get ready for what's coming. Martial law and now and Q now. Exactly. Yeah, no more Congress talks. We're done with that crap. It better be some action done right now. We can't. I mean, I don't want to be hyperbolic. I want you to really think for yourself from everything you've seen since July 13th. You don't even have to go back to 1968. You don't even have to go back to 1963. Forget that. Well, don't forget it, but you don't got to go there. You can just go back to July 13th and everything that has happened since then. What accountability has taken place? Oh, we're sorry. No, we're done being sorry. Now we're ready to fight. I'm done. I am absolutely done. This hits too close to home. You know, my dad, my brother, we're both in the military, and I know firsthand, if you're willing to take a shot at people in uniform, then I'm not even of any consequence. And my family is of no consequence. If you're willing to shoot at a soldier, then we don't matter. And because we don't matter, we have to make ourselves matter. We have to make sure everybody knows we matter. And you've got liberal judges who, when people defend themselves, are arresting the people who defended themselves. If people can't put all of this together and understand we're already at war. You may not know it. You may not feel it personally, but we're already there. There's no denying. You can just look at what's going on in the media. Look at what's going on in Congress and in the Senate. They're just sitting on their hands. Everybody's on X talking crap. Nobody's doing anything. And I can say that with quite confidence. Nobody. And it was so interesting when I turned on the television this morning and I was flipping through the news and I'm like, they already moved on? Some of these stations were, doing cooking stuff and showing people how to make turkey. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? We can't normalize this. We can't let this just be normal. Then I'm looking at people making happy TikTok videos and they're happy that these people got shot. Oh no, you're at war. You are. It's a different kind, but it's beginning to become like the regular kind. Legally invaded. Yeah. Trump needs to activate ASAP. I'm so sick of this. I mean, we all are. We are all are. Yeah, you saw it. He saw Big O Mom saw it when they were doing the Doocy cookbook thing, and I'm like, Ixnay, cut. You might not want to be having the big, hey, here's the Peter Doocy and Steve Doocy are home cooking pumpkin pie. How about just stop. All right, so I'm gonna let you go ahead. We've been at war. We definitely are. I don't want anyone to think I'm being hyperbolic, but I just see it. You guys need to go have a great Thanksgiving with your family. Robin, it was so funny. Both of the dogs, Lily and Midas, were both sitting in here with me. And then all of a sudden, I'm at home right now, and I have the studio door shut. And all of a sudden, I'm looking around, and they're milling around. I'm like, what's going on? You gotta go to the bathroom or something? And I went, oh, okay, that's what it is. The smell of the beast cooking. They all started sniffing and heading to the door, and I had to. Judge Janine was talking. I had to let them out, and they sprinted to the kitchen. I'm about to sprint there myself. I haven't had breakfast, but I just, let me just. There are a couple super chats here. I just want to wish every one of you, wherever you're going to be today, to have a very safe and enjoyable Thanksgiving. And with that, what I'd really like you to do is to forget the the political aspect of things. Look around the table, look around the house, maybe take some quiet time. And just look at those people around you that you love. And just do a quiet scan. Stand in a doorway. Stand a bit back from the table and say to yourself, everybody that matters to me is in peril. When you look at it from that perspective and realize this is what matters to me, and there are people out there here already that want to take that from you. You're going to be eating and praying and watching football and telling stories and maybe going out back and playing football yourselves or maybe shooting some hoops and understand, wow, man, your whole family or part of the family is here. And there are people out there right now in our country who want to take this from you, who don't want you to have that quiet time with people you love. And then find your perspective. Because once you do that, once you're sitting at the table or you make the phone call or the Zoom call, or what do you have with Apple? I have the Android, the FaceTime, I guess they call it. Whatever you're doing, just take a second and realize there are people who want to take this from me. And when you have that perspective of there are people out there who are trying to separate you forever from everything you love, then it'll dawn on you that we're at war. It's hard, but put the armor of God on at that point, and then give thanks because they haven't been taken from you. And then tomorrow wake up and say to yourself, what am I going to do to make sure none of them are taken from me? What are you going to do to the best of your ability to make sure that scene, wherever you are tonight, continues for years to come? Because right now, there are people out there who don't want to see you praying, don't want to see you eating turkey. It's an indigenous thing that they hate, even though they don't know the story of Squanto. Maybe go look up. Yesterday I played last night the story by Rush Limbaugh, which is the true story of Thanksgiving. You know what? Instead of the after party, it's about the same length of time. Let me go ahead and I'm going to do the super chats, but then do I have it? Yeah. Instead of the normal after party, it's the exact same amount of time. I'm going to let you guys listen to that again from last night and just realize how lucky you are to be in America. Excuse me. All right, super chats. Stephen, I go to town, home locked and loaded. Yeah, exactly. I hope you live in an area that allows that. Buddy Sanders agreed. If they weren't in D.C., the gangbangers would be there. Seditious Six knew about this. They were trying to soften the troops so he could do his crime. Yeah. Wow, didn't even think about that. Or was that the activation? Was that the activation? When you see this video drop, it's time to move. Let's see what we got here. Chiosop again. Democrats always blame the victim. They are crap. And again, if he was an op, where's Tulsi Gabbard? I think we're going to hear some more stuff. I mean, this probably caught everybody at a bad time. Who knows who was traveling? Who knows where people were? Remember, Tulsi's from Hawaii. Maybe she's in Hawaii. I don't know. But they moved fast. They got people into Washington and did all kinds of things. So I don't want to go out on a bad note. And so the after party is good music, but I think this thing by Rush might be more appropriate. I'm going to put this on, let this be the after party. And unless President Trump comes out later on this evening, I'm not going to do anything until tomorrow, but we'll see. Because last night he came up with like 15 minutes notice. Wait a second. What's his name? Neo. Thanks, Barry T. We must keep praying, be thankful for all blessings, keep God on this day. Absolutely. God bless our country and President Trump. Completely agreed. All right, so Rush Limbaugh.
the real story of Thanksgiving, going back to the very first early days of the Pilgrims arriving at Plymouth Rock, is that socialism failed. Now, the story of the Pilgrims begins in the early part of the 17th century. The Church of England under King James I was persecuting anyone and everybody who did not recognize the church's absolute civil and spiritual authority, actually the state. Now, those who challenged the ecclesiastical authority and those who believed strongly in freedom of worship were hunted down. It's in England in the 1600s. They were hunted down, they were imprisoned, sometimes executed for what they believed. So a group of separatists, people that didn't want any part of this, fled first to Holland. They liked wooden shoes and cheese. They established a community. They were there for 11 years. After 11 years, about 40 of these separatists who liked wooden shoes and cheese agreed to make a perilous journey to the New World. They had heard about it. Some new exciting place hadn't been developed. They knew that they were going to face hardship. Hardship like you and I don't know. And I'm not preaching to you. I'm just telling you, we don't know the hardship these people endured. We can't. We are way too advanced now. People who lived in the 1600s would not believe life today. Try to explain flight, jet travel. They wouldn't understand it. They knew they were facing hardship. But paramount importance to them was living freely and worshiping God according to the dictates of their own consciences, their own beliefs. That's what they were denied the freedom to do in England. So, August 1st, 1620, the Mayflower set sail. There were a total of 102 passengers, including 40 of these separatists, the Pilgrims. There were just 40 of them. They were led by a man named William Bradford. Remember his name. On the journey across the Atlantic, you talk about something that had to be frightening and scary. The Mayflower was not much bigger than a 50-foot boat. 102 people on it. On the journey, William Bradford set up an agreement, a contract, if you will, that established just and equal laws for all members, all 40 members of this pilgrim community. Didn't matter what their religious beliefs were. These were the laws they were all agreeing to live by. Now, where did these laws, these ideas, come from? We're talking about the Mayflower Compact is what Bradford wrote. The Mayflower Compact derived from the Bible. The Pilgrims were a people completely steeped in the Bible, Old and New Testaments. They were a devoutly religious people. No matter what else is said about them, and even that is denied, they were devoutly religious. They looked to the ancient Israelites for much of their example, and because of the biblical precedent set forth in Scripture, they never doubted, because of their faith in God, that their experiment would work. They never doubted they would get to the New World. They never doubted that once they got there, they would thrive. The journey was long, it was arduous, it was dangerous. And when they finally landed, when the Pilgrims finally landed in New England in November, according to William Bradford's detailed journal, they found a cold, barren, desolate wilderness. Imagine New England, as it exists today, has nothing but rocks, forest, undeveloped nature in November and getting colder. There were no friends to... There was no shelter of any kind other than what, hiding under a tree. There was nothing, folks. It was desolate. There were no hotels. There were no inns. There were no places to clean up. There were no houses. This was real hardship. The sacrifice that they had made for the freedom to worship was just beginning. During that first winter, remember they arrive in November, during that first winter, half of them, including William Bradford's own wife, died of starvation, of sickness, exposure to the elements. Now we're getting close to what you were taught in school. When spring finally came, and by the way, writing that doesn't do it justice. Spring didn't just finally came. It was a survival. It was an act of survival that you and I cannot possibly relate to or understand. American Special Forces can. Military people who've been trained can understand what the Pilgrims were. You and I can't. We've never done anything like that first winter in the New World. They survived it. Spring finally came. They did meet the Indians, the Native Americans who were there, who did help them in planting corn and fishing for cod. They showed them where the beavers were so the beavers could be skinned for coats, other things. You animal rights people are not going to like some of this story, but it happened. But even at this, even with this degree of assistance from the Indians and Native Americans, there wasn't any prosperity yet. They had the Mayflower Compact. They had these laws they were living by, but there was no prosperity yet. I wonder why. Now, this is important to understand here, folks, because this is where modern American history lessons end, with the Indians teaching the Pilgrims how to eat, how to fish, how to skin beavers and all that. That's where it ends. And that's the feel-good story, but that doesn't even get close to the true story. Thanksgiving is actually explained in some textbooks as a holiday for which the Pilgrims gave thanks to the Indians for saving their lives. It wasn't that. That happened, but Thanksgiving was a devout expression of gratitude. The Pilgrims to God for their survival and everything that was a part of it. Now, here's the part that has been omitted. The original contract the Pilgrims entered into in Holland, they had sponsors. They didn't have the money to do this trip on their own. They had sponsors. There were merchant sponsors in London and in Holland. And these merchant sponsors demanded that everything that the Pilgrims produced in the New World would go into a common store, a single bank, if you will. And that each member of the Pilgrim community was entitled to one share. So everybody had an equal share of whatever was in that bank. All of the land they cleared, all of the houses they built belonged to that bank, to the community as well. And they were going to distribute it equally because they were going to be fair. So all of the land that they cleared and all the houses they built belonged to everybody, belonged to the community, belonged to the bank. And it just wasn't working. It was collectivism. It was socialism. It wasn't working. That first winter had taken a lot of lives. The manpower was greatly reduced. So William Bradford decided to take bold action, which I will describe when we get back. I want to get back to where we left off. William Bradford, the governor of the Pilgrim community, saw that none of this was working. The Mayflower Compact was not working. Giving everybody a single share of stock in the common store, in the common bank, was not working. Collectivism. It was as costly and destructive to the Pilgrims as it is and has been to anybody who has ever tried it. So Bradford decided to scrub it. He threw it out and took bold action. He assigned a plot of land to each family. Every family was given a plot of land. They could work it, manage it, however they wanted to. If they just wanted to sit on it, get fat, dumb, happy, and lazy, they could. If they wanted to develop it, if they wanted to grow corn, whatever on it, they could. If they wanted to build on it, they could do that. If they wanted to turn it into a quasi-business, they could do whatever they wanted to do with it. He turned loose the power of the capitalist marketplace. Long before Karl Marx was even born, long before Karl Marx was a sperm cell in his father's dreams, the Pilgrims had discovered and experimented with what could only be described as socialism, and they found that it didn't work. Now, it wasn't called that then, but that's exactly what it was. Everybody was given an equal share. And you know what happened? Nobody did anything. There was no incentive. Nothing worked. Nothing happened. What Bradford and his community found was that the most creative and industrious people had no incentive to work any harder than anybody else did, unless they could utilize the power of personal motivation. But while most of the rest of the world's been experimenting with socialism for over 100 years, longer now, trying to refine it, perfect it, reinvent it, the Pilgrims decided early on to scrap it permanently. What Bradford wrote about this experiment should be in every school child's history lesson. If it were, we might prevent so much suffering. We might have prevented this election if the true story of Thanksgiving had been taught for years and years and years. And I'll tell you what Bradford wrote and how they fixed it when we get back after this obscene profit time out here at the bottom of the hour. So William Bradford, after putting everybody in a common store, the Mayflower Compact, they wanted to be fair. They wanted everybody to have one common share of stock in everything that happened that the Pilgrims produced, and it bombed. It didn't work. There was no prosperity. There was no creativity, because there was no incentive. Here's what Bradford wrote about the failure. For this community, so far as it was found to breed much confusion and discontent. They were not happy, in other words. This community was found to breed much confusion and discontent and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. In other words, nobody worked. The way they set it up killed and discouraged work. There was no need. For young men that were most able and fit for labor and service, sat around and did nothing, should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without being paid for it. They said, why do that? So they didn't. It was thought to be injustice. Why should you work for other people when you can't work for yourself? What's the point? So you hear what he was saying here, folks? The Pilgrims found that people could not be expected to do their best work without some incentive. So what did they try? What did Bradford's Pilgrim community try next? They unharnessed the power of free enterprise. They invoked capitalism, the principle of private property, all the way back in the 1400s. It was incredible. Every family was assigned its own plot of land, and they could do with it whatever they wanted to do. Bradford wrote, "This had very good success, for it made all hands industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been." So when profit was introduced, when the opportunity to prosper was introduced, it went gangbusters. That, my friends, is the essence of the true story of Thanksgiving. This is where it gets really good. If you're laboring under the misconception that I was taught in school, they set up trading posts, they exchanged goods with the Indians after they had enjoyed this prosperity. It was not the Indians that brought them prosperity, and it's not said to insult anybody. The Indians assisted them on their arrival, undeniably. But what led to prosperity for these original settlers was a discovery that the common store failed. Socialism didn't work when they introduced what turns out to be capitalism. They didn't have the name for it, but when they turned loose individual incentive, keep what you produce, sell what you don't need, they went crazy. This is not something they were taught by anybody but self-experience. It was not the Indians. None of this is said to put anybody down. Don't misunderstand. The Indians did a lot of things that helped them, which I'll get to in just a second, but it was their own industriousness. They set up trading posts, they exchanged goods with the Indians, they sold stuff to them. And those profits allowed them to pay off the debts of their sponsors in London and in Holland. And you know what? The success of that colony, after they had abandoned socialism and tried what was essentially capitalism, the word spread throughout the old world of this massive amount of prosperity that was there for the taking in the new world. And guess what happened? The new world was flooded with new arrivals. The success and the prosperity of the Plymouth settlement attracted more Europeans and began what came to be known as the Great Puritan Migration. And all it took was prosperity and the word spreading across the Atlantic Ocean of how there was prosperity and it was there for the taking. All you had to do was get there and give it a shot. The lesson is, the true story of Thanksgiving is that William Bradford and his Pilgrim community were thanking God for the blessings on their community after the first miserable winter of a documented failure brought on by their attempt at fairness and equality, which was socialism. It didn't work. Only when they abandoned it did it work. And I need to say again, because I don't want people to be misunderstood, get noses out of joint. The Native Americans, the indigenous peoples, the Injuns, whatever you want to call them, they were of considerable assistance, and they were friendly when the Pilgrims arrived. But they had little, if anything, to do with the prosperity that occurred, because that was the result of Bradford and the Pilgrim leadership deciding to change their structure according to the Mayflower Compact. Now, the Indians assisted, naturally, I can't deny it. I mean, they taught them how to fish and this kind of thing that they didn't know how to do, and that led them to be productive, undeniably so. But it was the Pilgrim community itself which experienced this massive prosperity, the word of which spread all the way back to the Old World, Europe, across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, as I told you, during that first winter, 1620, only 44 of the original 102 Pilgrims survived. They had an elected governor by the name of John Carver. And it was an Indian by the name of Squanto who came to their rescue. And this is, as I say, explored in great detail in Rush Revere and the Brave Pilgrims. Now, Squanto was no ordinary native. Early settlers in 1610 captured him and sold him into slavery. A group of Catholic friars ended up freeing him, brought him to England, where he learned to speak English. In 1618, serving as an interpreter on an English ship, he was brought back to the New World. It was Squanto, who is a famous Native American in his own right in the Pilgrim story. It was Squanto who taught the Pilgrims how to plant, how to fish, how to skin beavers. It was Squanto who brokered a peace treaty between the Pilgrims and other Indian tribes. There was more than one tribe of Indians. It was not copacetic. It was not friendly and at one with nature. It was not anything like the multiculturalists would have you believe. There were squabbles, there were power struggles, turf battles. It was human. The Indians, the Pilgrims, everybody was scrambling for power, for survival. Survivability was the name of the game, and it was not guaranteed. Now, many of the Pilgrims literally believed that God had sent Squanto to save them. And they believe, Pilgrims believe, that without Squanto, they never would have survived or thrived. And they experienced a tremendous harvest in 1621, and that's the big gathering that is taught in the history books. The native Indians and the Pilgrims joined together for a huge feast, which is the foundational story of the Thanksgiving story that's taught in public schools. But again, that is not the real story of Thanksgiving. That's the textbook brain. It did happen, but it's so much more than that. And I love taking the opportunity every year to explain the truth, especially now, given how this election has apparently, allegedly fallen out. Because even as the Federalist side, this is so great that the story is spreading. One of the most important legacies of the early settlers is that they experimented with socialism in the 1620s and it did not work. Private property rights, personal responsibility, saved the Plymouth colony from extinction and laid the economic foundation for the free and prosperous nation that we all enjoy today. And that is exactly right. And that is the true story of Thanksgiving, and that has been what we have shared with you every Thanksgiving for the past 31 years. Now a brief break. We'll be back after this. This is George Washington's Thanksgiving Proclamation, first one establishing the Thanksgiving holiday as a distinct and unique American holiday. I'm going to read it to you in toto. It's not that long. Whereas, whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor. And whereas both houses of Congress have by their joint committee requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal flavors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th day of November next, to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being who is the beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favorable interpositions of his providence, which we experienced in the tranquility, the union, and plenty which we have since enjoyed, for the peaceable and rational manner in which we have been enabled to establish constitutions of government for our safety and happiness, and particularly the national one now lately instituted for the civil and religious liberty with which we are blessed, and the means we have of acquiring and diffusing useful knowledge, and in general for all the great and various favors which God hath been pleased to confer upon us. And also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech him to pardon our national and other transgressions, to enable us all, whether in public or private stations, to perform our several and relative duties properly and punctually, to render our national government a blessing to all the people, by constantly being a government of wise, just, and constitutional laws, discreetly and faithfully executed and obeyed, to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, especially such as have shown kindness unto us, and to bless them with good government, good peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue, and the increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant unto all mankind such a degree of temporal prosperity as God alone knows to be best. Given under my hand at the city of New York, the 3rd day of October in the year of our Lord, 1789, George Washington. How many of you have heard that our founders were not religious? That they were atheists or agnostics? They really didn't have much to do with religion at all. That is George Washington's first Thanksgiving proclamation, thanking God in practically every sentence of it for the establishment of our Constitution, for the establishment of our government, our good government, for the safety and well-being of our people, for blessing the United States of America. This is how far we have strayed. A speech like this or a Thanksgiving proclamation like this, why, there would be hell to pay. The American left, imagine Donald Trump reading this proclamation in the name of George Washington. Can you imagine that happening? Can you imagine the reaction the American left when they were talking about civil rights violations, separation of church and state, forcing religion on people? Of course, this was not forcing religion on anybody. This is simply an acknowledgement by the first president of the United States of the role God played in the establishment of this country, for which he was there, for which he participated.